All right, you were just telling me this off camera, Chris, but there's more to the Zimbabwe story than even I know. We were talking about the 1994 sighting and everything.
Yeah.
And you said there was happening like the night before?
There was, yeah. There's a lot of sightings the night before. You know, Randall Nickerson did a great job on the, what was it called? The Ariel Phenomenon. Great movie. Check it out. I would highly recommend watching that. He was so close to everybody involved, you know, with Emily Trim, who is, you know, sadly passed away not too long ago. He was very close with her and close to everybody there. But yeah, he interviewed a pilot as well. I think you can check this out on their YouTube channel. I don't think it made the cut of the movie.
Oh, wow.
But the pilot talks about like them picking something up on the radar as well that kind of moves across the radar, and they're like, it's probably a glitch or whatever.
The night before these kids saw it.
Yeah, there was stuff going on in space the night before, but there was also space debris re-entering orbit. And I think that a lot of debunkers and a lot of people who were looking for something turn to that. But every other day we get something, you know, re-entering orbit. So
yeah.
But yeah, that and the fact that a lot of people, you know, saw some stuff the night before. On top of that, there is a giant uranium mine close by as well. So
it's a uranium mine right there?
Yeah.
That's nice and convenient.
Yeah. So it seems, you know.
What do the aliens want with uranium?
I don't know. Maybe they just want to know what we want with uranium.
That's what I think.
You know?
They're just studying us where they're little squirrels or ants.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're like, don't play with that. Don't play with it. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's the case. That was the one that very early on in me really thinking about this stuff made me go, whoa.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot of kids.
Kids, man.
Now, kids, you know, listen, there's always some sort of explanation that could say the other side's true. But when you look at how they describe potentially encountering those ETs, you know, out hopping on the logs just off where their school campus was there in Zimbabwe, and the consistency of all of them describing it, and then the patterns that they go through, like the telepathic nature of the communication specifically being about how, you know, you humans have no idea what you're capable of, or, you know, basically like themes of don't blow yourselves up, like as a human race, etc. The size of the beings, you know, in the 3-foot area, the way they looked. This is all pre-internet era.
Yeah.
So it's not like people could be on like Reddit threads and like do copycat in that way. Yep. And when you look at all the different sightings around the world, across the continents, everywhere, the ones I'm thinking of are pretty much every continent except Antarctica that I'm aware of, although there's a lot of stories from Antarctica. It's like when you look at all those sightings from World War II on, the patterns of what they describe are very, very similar. And that's what gives me pause, because I'm like, okay, I know all these people didn't like come together in a group in a chat room somewhere in 1971 when, you know, this is happening over a lot of different years, again, all pre-internet.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Rua in Zimbabwe, you know, there's a lot of really interesting things there to look at as well. So not only were there children witnesses, there were teachers that witnessed that stuff too. You know, and people forget that. There were adults that just were afraid to come forward. But there were way more witnesses than were documented in the documentaries.
Yeah.
Just a lot of people didn't want to come forward.
Yeah.
And one thing that I like is you look at the drawings and they're not all exactly alike. Now, upon initial inspection, you might think that that is, you know, that leads, oh, maybe they're lying. But actually, for me, it tells me that they're telling the truth, because when you remember something, if everybody remembers it exactly the way it happened, that's a script. Right? And this is like there's just enough deviation between the stories where you're like, no, there's clearly, you know, the fundamental story here seems to be true. Yeah.
There was also, I think it's the principal of the school, someone high up in the school later came forward years later apologizing because she didn't believe them.
Yeah.
And once she had seen all the evidence that they presented, and obviously like the studies that had been done by Dr. John Mack from Harvard and all that, she was like, oh my God, like I should have, it seemed crazy, of course, but I should have listened. And that's nuts to me, because even if something like this did happen, wherever it happens in the world, we are trained to be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely, man. And, you know, it's one of the things where you start to go, why, right? Why children? Why this place? Now, if you look at that school, it was an international school.
Yes.
There's children from all around the world,
That's
all
right.
races and backgrounds and religions. And, you know, as I was talking to a friend of mine, Luigi Venditelli, who is also really close with Emily Trim, he's currently working on the Bob Lazar movie. And he was telling me, like, if you were to sort of test humanity on, you know, contact and how, you know, what would happen if contact happened, that's how you would do it. You know,
Yes.
people say, oh, I want it to land on the White House lawn. No one's going to believe it.
It's the biggest UFO ever.
Yeah, exactly. But no one's going to believe it.
No one's going to believe it.
It's going to feel like a setup. It'll feel like
Yep.
them. It'll feel like like some type of U.S. military thing, like a Psy-Op. No one's going to buy it. So, you know, for them to do it at a school where there's innocent children and like, this is like the perfect way to make contact when you think about it.
Yeah. I actually, you know, I try to think as best I can, which is completely impossible, but from what we can as like a human brain, I try to think about what would I be thinking if I were like an advanced civilization, whatever it is, and I were coming here to study the people here. And I've always wondered about like the simulation theory, and I'm not talking about Rizverk's theory.
Sure.
I'm talking about them literally wanting to simulate what would happen if, you know, blank, as an example. When you hear about like a UFO being sighted, whether it be like Lonnie Zamora out in the desert where he actually saw it and they allowed him to be seen or whatever, if a civilization were able to like bend wormholes or whatever, or bend the speed of time and to be able to get here, I got to think they figured out invisibility or, you know, speeds that are so high that no one can ever be seen or be able to prevent anything like a crash in our universe. So that all being equal, it's like maybe then they're like, ooh, let's see what happens if we crash.
Yeah.
Show them one and just see how people will react to it, because most people won't believe it. But like, what will the civilization down there on Earth do when someone comes home and goes, yo, I just saw an alien in the desert?
Yeah, the donation theory too, you know, it's really interesting. I've given a lot of thought on especially like the abduction side and a lot of the sightings, and what it seems to me, it's like the kind of working theory that I have right now is that we are dealing with some type of system. And the reason I say that, like, are you familiar with like, and I hate quoting 4chan as being a source here, but there has been like, you know, this one guy that came out on 4chan who was like, oh, I, you know, worked at an underground thing that we were looking at this mobile construction unit in the ocean, this giant thing, and like in the Atlantic that we're tracking that deploys these UFOs, and they go right back to it. And now after that, he said at the end, which is something that stuck with me, notice yourself coming back to this thread. And I swear every time we get an update from whether it's Congress or we get some, oh, they're in the ocean or the drone flaps or whatever it is, it always leads back to what that guy was saying. So my conviction level, you know, started really low on that, and it's been growing ever since. And so I'd put that into this theory as, okay, if I were to, let's say I have the technology to bounce around the universe at will. Okay, we've established it. It's been billions of years. Our civilization has been around, and I can now blink anywhere I want in the universe. Let's say I have that technology. You would find 100 billion exoplanets that are capable of sustaining life.
Yeah.
Right, instantly. Now, because you're so advanced, you probably wouldn't even show up to these planets yourself. You would have some type of von Neumann-esque probe that lands in the oceans, that's buried, sequestered deep into, you know, out of reach, that deploys a sort of immune system that the planet has, this sort of white blood cell, that if ever the scales are tipped too far in one direction, it would come out, shut down the nukes. It would come out during times of war. It would come out, you know, and then go right back down. Now, these ships would require sometimes, especially for like the genetic stuff that they're probably doing as well, because if you're sort of creating this simulated panspermia, you would have to, you know, not only feed it plant life, but also probably some type of, you know, mammalian life form or all sorts of life form from all around the universe. So what you would do is you would genetically modify this plant life you got from this planet, bring it over here. You would grab an animal from over here, and you do this to all the planets, right? So that life thrives everywhere, right? That's kind of, and so there's so many cases of these aliens. They show up and they're grabbing dirt samples, they're grabbing rock samples, or there's genetic modifications, and then they just leave. And so I'm thinking maybe this is also just part of the system where it's like this sort of eco zoo, this biome that they're trying to preserve and maintain. And if you were to do genetic modifications, you might need some type of biological drone in order to do that. That is part of the system. So now we have these genderless grays taking people, telling them the same things over and over. We're not going to hurt you, proceed to hurt you, show you how bad you are to the planet, and then put you right back in your bed. And, you know, like this kind of like system over and over and over. Now, these ships don't have toilets. They don't have kitchens. They don't have pictures hanging on the wall.
Is that just because we haven't, from the people who have described them and claim they've been in them, they haven't ever seen those things?
I mean, yeah, but you can also look at people like Bob Lazar. If you believe what he says, like, you know, it's barren. These things have nothing in them, no controls even, and just seats, you know, although he didn't go on the top floor of this UFO, you know, for him, there was no control area. And then you look at some other cases where people talk about how these beings interact sort of psychically or psionically with the technology, and that without the beings, these crafts can't actually function. These beings are like a part of the craft. They're interacting with like maybe the microtubules in their brain and to interact with like this quantum field that, you know, the UFO lives in. I don't know. But that, if I were this system, if I were this like AI system in place and a UFO crash, I wouldn't be too worried. Because as soon as the being dies, you can't fly the craft anyways. And I think that's what's been happening. I think a lot of the stuff, if there is recovery stuff, which I believe there is, I think we're just dealing with their tech that we can't do anything with. And that's why they're not too worried about it.
Did you know that 1 in 8 Americans are currently prescribed anti-anxiety medications? It is a quiet epidemic that is sweeping the West right now. And people who start on these medications have a very hard time quitting. Recovering from benzodiazepine addiction or alcohol addiction is essentially like recovering from brain damage. But what if I told you that a legal mushroom that has been weirdly embedded into our culture is helping people to finally get off these GABAergic substances? I'm talking about Amanita muscaria, the little red top mushroom with the white dots that's depicted in Alice in Wonderland and Mario. This is a legal mushroom to buy, possess, and sell in every state except Louisiana. And thousands of people are using it to get off benzodiazepines and alcohol. This mushroom isn't only for people looking to quit their anti-anxiety medications. People are tapping into its power as a natural nootropic for focus during studies and work, a non-addictive alcohol replacement at parties, a dream-enhancing tool for vivid nights, and even a gentle aid for pain recovery. For years, there was a massive gap in the market where nobody in the United States was reliably importing this mushroom. That's where Minnesota Nice comes in, providing you with the highest quality raw Amanita and consumer-ready Amanita products at a price that you can afford. So use Minnesota Nice to help find your harmony today. You can go to www.mnniceethno.com/Julian. That link is in my description below, and use code JD22 for 22% off your first order. That's www.mnniceethno.com/Julian. Link in description below, and use code JD22 for 22% off.
And the problem though is that would signify that we are so far behind them, which actually this isn't a problem. This would make sense now I'm thinking about it. We're so far behind them that it doesn't even matter to them. They're like, oh, they got one of our,
don't care.
Yeah, don't worry about it. The way you describe like just picking up dirt from, you know, one of 100 billion exoplanets or something like that, and we happen to be that could make sense, even though in our world, we're trying to figure out how to colonize Mars just to get people there that they could survive and not die on the place.
That's right.
These guys could be so far ahead that they have 100 billion Marses that they've already made Earths.
Well, even better than that, because if you were trying to preserve the seed of human life, or the flame, right? The flame of consciousness that we're trying to keep alive. You know, we're trying to be interstellar. We're trying to go to Mars and do all these things. Well, if you had that technology, you wouldn't be looking for barren radioactive rocks. You know, like living underground or in a bubble doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Instead, you would find exoplanets that can already harbor some type of primitive life and then genetically modify it with your own DNA so that you're preserving your seed. in these other planets, and then just monitor them with your system. And every 1,000 years, you come down in a chariot of fire, and or a fiery wheel from the sky, and you give them metallurgy, or you give them religion, or you give them, agriculture, and you allow them to sort of, grow as you're just checking up on them. Religion is important to build society. Without religion, we wouldn't have Rome, right? And Rome was like one of the first major, powers of the world. Before that, everything was tribal.
Yeah.
Before that, small villages would get together and they were fighting over power, and they would never flourish. So it was due to religion that we have modern society today. Like, it's a very important thing that was introduced into our civilization that allowed us to have a bigger sort of colony with consequences and everything. Now, is religion still, valuable today? That's debatable, but I think at the time, it was extremely valuable in order to start civilization.
Would they give us religion because they, in their advanced civilization, this is a hypothetical question,
sure,
I guess, in your opinion, they as an advanced civilization experience religion themselves, whatever their version of it is, and so they know the power that type of thing, like a lower level of it, I guess in this case, can hold over society when you give them complete unknowns because they can't know nearly as much as we, the aliens in this case, know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, how do pets, how do they think? What do they think about us? They might consider us some type of god that can summon food all the time. We don't know that, right? So we know what's best for them. The way that they interpret us, is up to how we present ourselves. Yeah. Because we're just so much more advanced. So I think if you were to seed the universe, you would need several ingredients. And then I think there's a prime directive, like kind of like in Star Trek. I think when you reach a certain point, maybe that's not the development of nukes, but maybe that's us throwing the nukes away. That becomes like, oh, welcome to the family type deal. The reason I think another reason to support that it might be a system, at least 50% of it, maybe there are rogue entities coming here that are, that look like giant cats or something. I don't know. But I think for the most part, there is a system we're interacting with. But one of the reasons I think we're interacting with a system is because it seems like every time we have a war, every time we have any type of strife, we start seeing orbs or Foo Fighters or what have you, or flaps over, in DC and whatnot. And so, you look at things like perhaps Skywatcher and what they're doing. I wouldn't put it past them to simulate war games out in these ranges with Northrop Grumman, right? The CIA was doing it, according to Lou, Project Interloper, where they were dragging nukes out in the middle of the ocean to try and, attract these things. Right. If you're an intelligent species, these aren't fish, dude. These aren't fish. Like, so whatever is, if you're blowing stuff up, like you look at Skinwalker, right? They're throwing rockets in the air, and that's where the phenomenon shows up. Maybe that's just like some type of response system, some immune response that's like, hey, what are you guys doing? Not necessarily the intelligence behind the AI, but just that like automatic. And we found a way to sort of short circuit that and make them appear through these, through these events. And then on the other side of that, I think, you get people like Chris Bledsoe or, even Dorothy Izat in Canada, where the opposite happens, where like, these psionic assets as well, they claim that beaming out like pure love and whatever will attract them, right? So maybe there's two sides to that. Maybe it's like, oh, if we're bad to each other, they show up to try and shut it down. But maybe if we start being good to each other, that's where they show up and they're like, hey, welcome to the family. Like, who knows?
You talked to Bledsoe on your show.
Yeah.
Right. What do you think of that story?
I think initially something did happen. I think there are classic marks of an abduction. I do think he was taken. He even says he was taken. But if you look at the case, there are 3 other witnesses that saw these glowing orbs. They didn't see him take him or any of that, but they were present during the arrival of these things, and were being apparently chased in their pickup trucks by these glowing molten, orbs. And so I do think initially something happened. After that, I think, it's a matter of taking him at his word, and as someone who's researching, that's hard for me to just put all my eggs into. I'm open to the idea, and I'm happy to shelve that or file that, catalog that information.
Yeah.
For instance, the date, April 2027, we're talking Easter 2020 or 2026 actually. So I'm like, all right, we'll put that in that category
See
what happens.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't think it's healthy to say I believe or I don't believe. I think that sort of binary thinking is what prevents data collection. I think if we do that, we automatically filter all information, whether we believe or don't believe. We filter the information that comes through. I'd rather create a space, a safe zone for everybody to speak, take the information judgment-free, allow them to really tell whatever they want to say, and then parse through the information myself over time and hold it up against other connections I might make. So
yeah, that's one of the things I like about you. Like, your shit, and you bring in all these different people. You've had in all like the biggest names. There's still a few more on the list you got to get in. I'm sure you'll get them in at some point. But like, you let them go through the whole story. You ask them step by step what happened. It's like getting it down on documented record. And also, by the way, the production of your show is amazing,
Thanks.
bro. Like, it looks
Appreciate
incredible. But like, you also, as a fan of this thing, you want the truth. You want to know, all right, what are we hearing from the government that's real? What seems to be bullshit? And like, I've seen you comment on some of that and some of those things while still like maintaining of like trying not to, make enemies out of people or do stuff like that, which I think is great. But it is a tough job because it's a space where the unknown unknowns are so vast. We're even like beyond hypotheticals to a point there that you are going to run, just statistically, you're gonna run into a lot of stories that end up being total bullshit.
absolutely,
And then it's like, is that a part of the plot? Is that a part of the thing where it's like, all right, this is how you poison the well? You throw Jason Sands in there, and then the people that believe that, it's like, see, look, they'll believe anything. You know what I mean?
Could be. That's absolutely right. And if you were to do that, you don't even need to do that purposely. People do that on their own without even realizing it.
Yeah.
I'll take it in the context of like a magic trick, for instance.
You're pretty good at that.
Pretty good at that, yeah. And there's a lot of correlation between how someone experiences a magic trick versus how they experience the phenomenon. And so, magicians know this, but as soon as you perform to somebody, we kind of stick around because what we do during our performances, for the most part, there's a lot of stuff involved, with sleight of hand, misdirection, showmanship, all this stuff, and suggestion and whatnot. But one thing that happens is the engineering of memory. That's the main component of a magic trick, which is why it doesn't always work best on camera. It's always better to do live because looking back, you might be like, oh, there was this little offbeat moment that didn't seem important that I forgot about.
Yeah.
That's now on camera. And so magicians will take a piece of information that isn't important, right? Make it seem really important. And then take a piece of information that is absolutely critical to the magic trick working and dismissing it as if it's nothing, being very flippant about it. So your brain is just going to take the big pieces, but it doesn't have time or storage to remember all the tiny nonsense that we threw aside. And so the memory you have instantly of the trick is different than what happened instantly. And that happens with experiencers as well. It happens with everybody. They're not unique in this, in that if I want to tell you what I felt during a magic trick, I will embellish for two reasons. One, I don't want you to think that I'm easily fooled, right? So I will just round off the edges a little bit more, and I'll think nothing of it. They're like, no, these edges don't really matter. No one's going to notice. And it's just kind of like, no, it didn't make a sound, but you were in your car. How do you know it didn't make a sound? No, we had the window down. So you'll round off the edges a little bit. And then secondly, firstly, you don't want to appear foolish. But secondly, I think the more, how do I put this? The more you experience magic or like the phenomenon, like this stuff starts to like, your reality is malleable, like from the get-go. Everything we experience,
100%.
Your sight, the sound, and everything. And so as soon as someone else can have agency over that for you, I mean, nothing should be taken into account, right? It's not admissible. It shouldn't be admissible in anything. You know, memory is so bad, and we can play around with it. So I think for those reasons, I think experiencers as well. You know, and here's the second reason. They want you to feel like you were there. That's the other thing, right? So if I'm doing a magic trick, I'm gonna try and say, oh, it was amazing. He was this high off the ground. When in reality it was like this high, right? But I want you to feel like you were there. I'm not trying to give you data. I'm trying to give you emotion so that you feel it, right? So an experiencer might do the same thing. They might be like, no, it was like the hair was standing up on my head. It's like, well, how do you know that? You can't see your hair.
They're trying to re-feel like they were there, which means it may not be a perfect rendition of it, you're saying.
Yeah, they're trying to make you feel what they felt, which is a human thing to do. It has nothing to do with lying, has nothing to do with being, just not telling the truth. It has everything to do with human connection.
Yes.
And so, through that, you have to filter the experiences, and it's impossible to do so. And so we know there's truth there, but some people might think that, it's a grift. When in reality, the memory is just so bad from these events. Like, it's so bad. It's not something you can count on. And so we just have to count on the stories, and we have to kind of like parse through it ourselves. But yeah.
Without naming names, have you, not even necessarily just on camera, but just in all your years of looking at this and talking to people, have you sat with people that are at least known a little bit by others out there, not just like a rando on Twitter or something like that, but have you sat with someone who's telling you a story and you're just like, this is complete bullshit?
I wouldn't say complete bullshit, but like I said, I think there's reason to believe that everyone telling a story, if you've told it more than once, you're making that story better as you go along. Think of the greatest tales, when you're with your buddies and you're like, oh, I got a story for you. How does that story compare to when you first, you tweak it a little bit just to get a reaction or to make people feel like they were there, or to get a laugh where it got a laugh that one time, you might throw that back in there.
Yep.
And so I think that's what's happening with these stories. And the longer we wait between the event and the telling of it, I mean, we have to assume the more muddy it gets. But that doesn't mean there wasn't something there initially. And so I think with a lot of experiencers, with Whitley Strieber, with Chris Bledsoe, with even Travis Walton. Travis Walton's different a little bit. Travis Walton doesn't waver at all. He's been one to this is it. And he gets quite defensive about any other detail being added on. He makes it very clear that this is what happened. But, you read a lot of books and you kind of it becomes subjective a little bit over time, and they start adding things. And I'm not saying it's not true. It's just hard to know.
Well, it's human nature, you're saying. Your explanation it's in line with a lot of things you'll hear different psychology experts talk about with eyewitness testimony in court and things like that. Stories, people, it's not that they're lying, but sometimes details will change over time just based on what reactions are when you're telling it, and time passed, and remembering things that weren't there and stuff like that. It's just natural to what it is. So the balance becomes trying to find the things that are the common thread, the things that make sense in one story. And then also when you have things like this, where it's people talking about experiences or potentially witnessing a UFO or something like that, to where you can line up commonalities across the stories pattern-wise. So you having Travis Walton in is pretty wild, because I'm naturally very skeptical of a lot of experiencer stories. And there's some big names out there that in my opinion, you mentioned it yourself, there are some that are just such clear grifters to me that even if there was something that happened at some point in their life, they're so far beyond that I just don't take anything they say seriously. That said, Travis Walton, he was on Joe Rogan's show 6 years ago, something like that. And he's been on some other big shows over the years. And this is a story that's 30, 40 years old.
50 in November.
50 years old. Wow.
Yeah.
God damn. Point being, though, down to the fact that his details stay the same, and like you said, he's strict with it. There's something about this one that even on the surface, though it sounds crazy, like when you watch him tell it, you're like, I don't know if that's exactly what happened, because who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
But like, I know he believes that, number one. And number two, something happened there. And just for people out there who aren't familiar with this story or forget it, can you just give the broad details of what happened when he was out in the desert there?
Yeah, it was. He was actually in the forest. It was 1975, November 5th in Snowflake, Arizona. He was a logger, like a lumberjack. Him and 6 of his buddies, including his brother, his crew, basically, were finishing
desert. Sorry,
my
bad.
Arizona.
I don't know why I was
Arizona.
I was thinking that other thing.
Okay, yeah. And so, they were out there. They were finishing their shift. They were driving home. They all pile up in the truck, and they see this light in a clearing. It's kind of a weird light, pretty bright. They drive up to the clearing and notice this giant UFO, this giant flying disc that's glowing, pulsating. It's got lights around it. It's dazzling. I would say, I think probably like 50 to 80 feet, like a big pretty big craft. And they all say, let's get the hell out of here. Like, what are we doing? And they're kicking the seat, like, drive, go, go, go. Because you have to understand, seeing something like that is like eldritch. It's like, it's earth shattering, right?
I don't think you can fathom it.
It shifts your paradigm instantly. It's, ontological shock, whatever you want to use, but it breaks your reality. And so they're like screaming, get the hell out of here. And Travis, being really bold and curious, gets out of the truck, approaches the craft, gets really close to it, like really close, starts hearing a noise as if it's like powering up, like like a swell, and then gets hit with like this beam. And everybody who saw him get hit, instantly they thought he was dead.
Right.
They're like, oh, he's dead. Let's get out of here. So they book it. They start driving away. Now they're panicking because they're like, this is crazy. They actually end up stopping, being like, we got to go back. We got to get him, obviously. And they go back, and he's nowhere to be found. They're combing this place, and they can't find him. So they end up going back into town, trying to get their story straight. What do we tell the cops, right? They get the cops in. Eventually, they tell them the story. The cop now thinks there's like a murder cover-up happening, like a bad one at that.
Yeah, I mean, where else would your head go? You're
exactly.
Like,
he's doing his job.
Yeah.
So, they went out that night to look. They didn't find anything. So then the next day again, they had like a 3-day search party, like comb the forest. No sign of him whatsoever. And now this thing is starting to make like national headlines. Well, 5 days and 6 hours later, Travis, on some remote payphone, I think calls his girlfriend and is like, "Hey, I'm here," but he's like obviously like all distressed, barely talking, very, very shaken up, emaciated, dehydrated, and they pick him up, they bring him home. Frenzy of a media starts showing up to his house and trying to get the scoop, obviously. And he ends up being convinced by, I think, his brother to, do regression, hypnotherapy. And through the regression was able to realize sort of what happened. And what he remembers through that regression is he woke up on a table. Now, this was depicted by Fire in the Sky movie in 1993. D.B. Sweeney plays Travis Walton. They completely butchered this part. So in Fire in the Sky, they make it like a horrific horror movie where he's like, they're
you gotta sell
drilling stuff in his eyes. I know, it's Hollywood, but they did him dirty on that because they actually cut that part out of the script when they gave him the script.
Oh, and then they put it back in.
Yeah, I bought the original storyboard, or a copy of the original storyboard, and showed it to Travis. And he was like, holy cow. He's like, they never showed me this.
Wow.
And so he's never seen that. So they purposely like omitted that. So
that's kind of fucked.
It is. That's Hollywood.
Yeah.
Did you know that there's an online cannabis company that ships federally legal THC right to your door? And they found a way to combine THC with carefully selected functional ingredients to target nearly every mood and health concern that you can think of? The company I'm talking about is Mood.com and their incredible line of functional gummies. Today, you can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com using promo code Julian at checkout. That link is in my description below. Forget one-size-fits-all supplements that only get you high. Mood's functional gummies are optimized to kick in in as little as 15 minutes and take you to the mood you're looking for. Whether that's Mind Magic Gummies for deep work and creativity, PMS support to ease cramps and balance mood swings, or their Sexual Euphoria Gummies to help you feel ready for action and turn every touch into a full-body experience. Listen, you can find gummies to just get you high pretty much everywhere these days. But Mood's functional gummies combine premium, federally legal THC with targeted botanicals to help you get in the perfect mood, usually in as little as 15 minutes. And everything ships discreetly right to your door. No dispensary lines, no awkward conversations, just better days and nights delivered to your doorstep. Best of all, not only is every Mood product backed by a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, but as I mentioned, our listeners are going to get 20% off their first order using code Julian at checkout. So head on over to mood.com, link in my description below, find the functional gummy that matches exactly what you're looking for, and let Mood help you discover your perfect mood. Once again, don't forget to use promo code Julian when you check out to save 20% off your first order.
So, they wanted that at the time, but I think what happened was way more interesting than that movie. So he wakes up on this table, he sees this bright light, he sees these sort of bulbous heads hovering over him, and he focuses in. Now, at this point, his brain is pounding out of his skull, his chest hurts. He literally feels like he's dying. He's in so much pain, he feels like he's dying. And he sees these creatures. They are about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, giant white heads. So not your typical grays. They've got big eyes, but they're brown, like sort of hazel colored. And they're wearing orange, sort of loose fitting orange jumpers. And he's on this table, and now he's freaking out. So he's like, who are you? Where am I? He realizes he's not at the hospital, which he thought he was. And he gets up off this table. His table is low to the ground. The ceiling's pretty low. The air is like musty and humid and hard to breathe, kind of claustrophobic. He reaches on this table, and he finds this rod, this clear rod, he says was heavier than glass, but was transparent. And he doesn't know what it was for. He was panicking. He starts swinging it at them. He's like, get away from me, get away. He notices there were other tools, like, sort of windy, metallic tools you don't want to see, type deal.
Oh, like they're going to go to town.
Yeah, or, later on, he's come to, his thought was that they fixed him. That he got too close, they accidentally, beamed him or something, and then he was left for dead, and then they revived him, they brought him back. Like, that's what he thought. Because he's like, they could have dropped me off on a meteor somewhere in the asteroid belt if they wanted to. They didn't have to fix me. They didn't have to bring me back. So he's swinging at these things. What frightened him the most, and this is like a wild detail, is their facial expressions never changed. And he took that as a sign of hostility. Because if you look at someone, you're going to fight them, and they're just like stone cold, that's like, you got to give me something, man. You got to give me a smile. You got to give me a frown. You got to give me something. Or else I'm going to think, this is weird and we're going to fight. And so they weren't giving him anything. They were kind of just like, doll face looking at him. And in hindsight, he's like, if they were telepathic, they wouldn't need facial features anymore.
They know what he's thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they leave. They scurry out of this room. And
he's not, so he was never like tied down, or he was never handcuffed or anything.
He had his clothes.
Like that. Yeah.
He was on a table. I did ask him this question, which I thought was really interesting. It's a detail I never heard before. I asked him if his if his feet were like hanging off the bed, off the table. And he goes, no. So I said, so it's a human-sized table, which I thought was interesting.
Wait, if the feet were hanging off the table?
Well, because they're small beings. I mean, the ceiling is low. He had to crouch down.
Right.
Why would the table be human-sized, right?
So his feet would be on the ground.
Yeah. So that I thought was really interesting. I was like, oh, there's a little factory somewhere, and they're like making human-sized tables, right?
Yeah.
And so they go out this opening. They kind of scurry away pretty quickly. He then walks down this windy, narrow hallway, sort of crouched down, and it's turning. Now you can imagine the fear that he must have that around any of these corners, there might be another one of these things just waiting to pop out, right?
I don't think I can imagine that fear. This is like...
Dude, so he's walking around this corner thinking, I got to look for the way out. I have to find a way out. He doesn't know he's in a spaceship, right? He doesn't know where he is. So he's looking for a way out. He gets into this room where all of a sudden, as soon as he walks in, he can see what he says is like a star map. He doesn't know if it was a projection or if it was actual space, but the entire room that he's in is just space. and there's a chair in the middle of the room. And so he sits in the chair and he starts like fiddling with the buttons. He's looking for a door. And all of a sudden the star map starts shifting around him really quickly without him moving, which is kind of disorienting. And instantly a door opens up behind him. Now, before we get into these beings, the beings that he had just seen, there is another case. If you want to look into it, it is William Herman, 1968.
Ooh, I don't know
Or
this one.
1978, sorry. So it's a few
Bill
years.
Herman?
Yes, it's a few years after. This guy had been taken multiple times, according to him. He has actually great pictures of UFOs.
Like that he took of the act, not a rendition.
of a craft, and it's like tilted at a 45 degrees. Some great pictures. You can pull them up.
All right, let's get that.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
And so Bill Herman describes the same beings. White, sort of pasty skin, big heads, 4.5 feet tall, brown eyes with orange jumpsuits. He describes the same beings wearing the same things. I thought was really interesting.
And he was on record in 1978 describing.
Yeah, this was 3 years after Travis, but
Okay.
Prior to any full publication of his work or his experience.
Is that the picture you're talking about?
He's got multiple. Yep, those are the ones which are pretty remarkable.
And he released these back then.
These were put out by Wendell Stevens in a book called Contact from Reticulum in, I think, probably the 70s or 80s.
Right, so a long time ago. Okay, that's not like in the last
probably in the
few days.
80s. Sorry, in the 80s, yeah.
Meaning it's not like some AI picture from 20... Yeah.
That's film.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
whether that's real or not, I don't know, but it looks pretty cool. And I like the fact that they're kind of out of focus. I think that's how it would be.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if there's like some weird propulsion involved. So anyways, Bill Herman describes the same beings, orange jumpsuits, like same physical characteristics, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, maybe he went to San Quentin.
Maybe it's a big Psy-Op. So anyways, put those beings aside for a second. He's in this big dark room. There's a chair in the middle of the room. And then behind him, a door opens. And he looks, and there's this tall, sort of Scandinavian-looking gentleman with a sort of straight, long hair, but like straight cut, like a page boy haircut, super weird. Tight blue jumpsuit, athletic, tall, and blue eyes, and wearing, this is the weird detail, a fishbowl kind of helmet over his head. Now you're thinking, okay, that's where it loses a lot of people. That's like, was this the Jetsons? What are we talking about here? Some mid-century alien.
Yeah.
There's a case, 1954, Jesse Rostenberg. If you look this up, you can type in Staffordshire UFO. She's on camera, and she gets pulled out by her two children who are like, Mommy, there's a UFO outside. There's a flying saucer, I wouldn't call it UFO back then, but there's a flying saucer. And she's like, don't be stupid. She comes outside, and sure enough, hanging over her house is a silver disc kind of like tilted. And she describes it as a Mexican hat looking thing. She's very sincere in this video. It's an interview with her. And she goes, the two gentlemen, they're sitting side by side. This is 1954. Two gentlemen are sitting side by side, and they had these page boy bob haircuts, these blue suits, and what looked like fish bowls over their heads.
Oh, yeah. There we got a picture of her right there holding up a
The
rendition of
same
that.
fish bowl type, And this is, again, prior to internet. You would have to, what a coincidence that, Travis Walton, days after his traumatic experience, would go to I don't even know where he would find this interview.
Right.
Or it's a coincidence that they're both tall, blonde figures with fish bowls over their heads.
That's what I'm saying. This
It's
is
a
where it gets
wild
weird.
coincidence.
Yep.
So I showed that to Travis. I don't think he'd ever heard of that before. So he's a little surprised by that. And then, so this being grabs him. He's thinking to himself, like, oh my God, thank goodness, a person. Like, there's these creatures over here, and he's yelling frantically, where am I? What are you doing? I'm dying. Like, he's yelling. And they're just stoic. Don't stone-faced, don't respond. He's thinking maybe the helmet's interfering with their hearing or something. So he's like, he doesn't know what's
Are
going on.
your ears fucked?
Yeah, he's like, take the fucking helmet off. and so this guy grabs Travis by the arm. They walk through the door down a platform. Now they're coming out of the UFO, but they're in like a hangar.
Did it feel like a human was grabbing him? Meaning like
Strong.
when he grabbed him, he's strong, but it feels like a human. It's not like he grabs him and a force field comes over him or something
No
like that?
force field, just incredible strength. Now, mind you, he was in a weakened state, but he was still mid-20s. He was a boxer. He
Yeah.
was a logger. He was on adrenaline. I mean, strong guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like nothing, just ragdolled him they're coming down this ramp, coming out of the flying saucer into this quarter of a cylinder, is the way he described it, room, massive. Lights that line the ceiling that he thought was like sunlight. He was like, it was like daytime. And he gets there and he sees lined up against the wall pill or tic tac shaped UFOs that are like chromium, sort of liquid mercury, as he put it. Sort of like the bean in Chicago type deal.
Mm.
And they're lining up the walls, joined by two other of these beings, a man and a woman, no helmets this time, jacked, perfect specimens. They had a familial resemblance, so like siblings almost. They're all, and they put him on a bed, and then they put a mask over his mouth, like a triangular mask without a tube or anything, and he passed out. That's the last thing he remembers. And then he remembers sort of waking up in the street, seeing the craft sort of just go up and to space, a different craft than the one that picked him up or beamed him. And yeah, that was his experience. Other than that, he doesn't waver. Like that's been his story since day one, since he did his regression. And so arguably, I think we can all agree, way more interesting than like scary gray aliens.
Oh yeah. It's a full process. And it's like, and then they let him go. And that comes back to how many other, if this is true, how many other times have they done that? Why are they doing that? Is this, again, like going back to that kind of simulation thing, like, oh, let's simulate how this little human goes back to the other humans and tries to make sense of this with them.
Yeah, and why are they working together? Like Travis thinks that maybe the little ones might have been in charge and they sent the big ones in because they looked human and that would not scare him, which I thought is an interesting theory. But also maybe they're just two factions and they're like, hey, we hurt this human guy. We don't know what to do with him. And Travis says that he never had a telepathic connection with any of them. And so he thought that whatever they did to him or whatever he was hit with disrupted that, which is why he was able to sort of fight them off, which is why they had to use like analog technology to like sedate him rather than anesthetize him through mental, faculties or whatever they, however they do it normally. So he was like kind of in maybe an immune state to their psi ability. Who knows?
How did he get put into the regression analysis psychiatry? Like whose idea was that? And when exactly did that happen?
I don't think it happened too long after, because I think he was so troubled by what had happened to him. Like he was catatonic.
Oh, I can imagine.
He didn't even know what happened to him. He was just, you couldn't talk to him when pressed on like, where were you type deal. He would just shut down. And if you look at the interview that Joe Rogan did with him, or you look at the interview that I did with him, he's like kind of happy, go lucky.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he talks about it, he has 1,000-yard stare and he doesn't even look at you in the eye. He's looking at something else. He's like there again. And that's heavy, man. That's really heavy. You can't fake that. Like, my dad was 30 years in the military and had PTSD, severe PTSD from like multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that stuff. And, you can tell. You can't fake that,
yeah.
And so for that alone, whatever it was he went through,
there.
He went through something really scary.
Yeah, and it's like, you don't know, it could have been something entirely different, but like there was something traumatic that happened to him out there, and the fact that it then lands on a story that is this detailed and this unique and this like fucked up, there's a lot of things at the same time, makes it interesting. It's not this one-dimensional kind of like, I saw an alien and it fucked me, or something like that. It's more like, there's steps to it. There were different ones. He's in these different rooms. They're looking at
There's
him.
cover up too. There's like that part of the forest like burned down, but there were like trees that were actually cut prior that they didn't cut. There's a whole lot of shady stuff.
Does he remember when they dropped him off?
He does. He just remembers being on the ground. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's also, I think, one other witness of the craft initially was a hunter and his wife. That hunter was also CIA.
Oh, that's nice.
So you got to wonder, right?
Yeah, they're always there.
Right? It makes you wonder, like, why does that have to, does that have anything to do with the story?
Yeah.
So there are all these, like, so many people are quick to dismiss Travis's story based on the idea that they wanted to get out of a logging contract or something. There are better ways to get out of a logging contract.
I could think of a few.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you don't have to be a mastermind.
Right.
It's what a weird way to make money. Like, none of these guys really profited from any of it. Other than Travis, perhaps, because that's what he does for a living now, because what are you going to do? You're going to go back to logging now? Like, after that, what do you do? No, of course. You write a book, you go on tour, you start talking about your story. That's what you do,
Yeah, and I think sometimes with some of these people that's something that'll get thrown at them, like, oh, you gotta monetize the whole thing or whatever. And I understand where that argument comes from, especially with some people who I'll remain unnamed. But at the same time, to your point, if your entire personal world order is that disrupted in a situation like that, like you described the ontological shock or like what it means about your place here, not just now on the planet, but you see yourself in a completely different light within the universe because of something that you've had access to that clearly almost no one else gets access to. It's like you can't relate to anyone anymore.
No.
He can't sit across from Chris Ramsay and be like, yo, you understand me, bro.
No.
It's
frustrating, endlessly frustrating for him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That like people are talking with as like what ifs all the time.
Yes.
And he's just got to like sit on it and be like, yeah.
It's like if you knew, but I try to simulate that in my mind without the alien example, just like in general. If you knew like some crazy secret of the universe, whatever that is.
Yep.
And you knew you couldn't just whip out the proof of it to someone because that's kind of the whole point. But you knew it.
Yeah.
Is that enough to not drive you crazy? That and who the fuck cares? If other people want to call me crazy for knowing it, fine. Like, is that enough to be secure in yourself?
Yeah.
That
I think, no, absolutely. I don't know. I think it even goes deeper than that with him too, in that he doesn't want to share his story. It terrifies him. He wishes to this day that he never got out of that truck. He's like, I really wish I wish my life would be different. I didn't ask for this life. He didn't want it, And when he's asked to tell his story, he always says, he sticks to his story. And then he always says, if this can help people, then good. If it can help people, that's it.
Yeah, it still creates and I feel bad about this sometimes, but it still creates the problem that a lot of people are going to want to try to get meaning out of their life by creating a reality in their head.
Yep.
Some people are going to straight up lie. Other people are actually going to start to believe the things they tell themselves.
Yeah.
And you're going to have all that noise.
Yeah.
Right? And you have all that noise of people saying things that, well, that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. It becomes the pile of shit that kind of drowns out anything that could be real. Like, I always think of it this way. I fight with Andy Bustamante on here about conspiracies and stuff all the time because he loves to give like the CIA propaganda line of like, well, never leave up to conspiracy what can be explained by stupidity. And I always say to him, I'm like, Andy, all right, let's hypothetically say that 99.9% of conspiracies that are out there that are told are bullshit, which actually, if you look at Twitter now, I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah.
But that's still a lot. That 0.1%, that's a lot of major conspiracies, and that means there is truth there. The law of averages and big numbers says, though, that because you have that 99.9 on your side, every time I bring something up, even if it's something like an Epstein, like something that's legit, you can then say, well, this is a part of the 99.9. You can always, it's never a part of the 0.1.
Of course.
And I think when like the alien thing, that's on a whole different level because you will hear, I'll go into these Twitter spaces sometimes and you'll hear someone and I'm just like, well, this is complete bullshit. But then I'm like, well, when are you going to get to one that's not? And then would it all sound like bullshit anyway? Because it's something that I can't even conceive. I don't know.
Yeah. And then what do you need for it to be considered not bullshit is the other thing, right?
Right. How do I even judge that?
Yeah. So when it comes to disclosure, I think everybody's road to disclosure is different. I think it's a journey. I think it's an ontological shift that happens over time. The more I'm exposed, I'm sure you as well, the more you're exposed to people who are studying the phenomenon or who have experienced things, your meter, sways up and down, but it seems to be like, okay, your conviction level grows over time. And then you start putting your own ontology against that. And then at one point, when you're given new information like this, you have to treat it one of three ways. You have to either ignore it, fit it into your worldview, like into the current model that everyone's built, the one that you've lived with, or expand your worldview. Those are the only three choices you have. And most people will ignore and fit it into their current model. Very few people will expand their worldview and let other things in because it's scary and it's meaningless. Because I'm going to let all this in and then what? And then go to work and then, and plan a birthday or like all these like weird things that, are kind of, just so meaningless in the grand scheme of things. How would I function? So I get why people would default to not believing or not wanting to expand their worldview, I should say, which is perfectly normal. But I think for a lot of people, doing it gradually is the way to go. I think that's how we get disclosure is through conversation. It's generational. If you look at from the late 40s to now, that's a couple generations. Give it another 2-3 generations.
Sure.
And this will be, a lot of it will be common sense, hopefully, or at least the notion that we're not alone. Like, let's just go get there. You know what I mean? Like the sheer size of the universe is so baffling. But then you look at cases like Travis's. If I go back to Travis for a second,
please,
and you have to wonder what in that case would help me believe, or what in that case would raise my conviction level, I should say, that it is real or that he is telling the objective truth. And, one of those things is not only are there multiple witnesses to this, and take this however you want to take it, but all 7 of them passed their lie detector tests, police lie detector tests. That's a big deal. That's like, okay, a lie detector is not a lie detector, it's a stress detector test.
Yes.
However, that's 7 people who are not trained to sort of fool those machines. The odds are that one of them is going to fail if they're not, if they're bullshitting, right? And they're under a lot of stress. They all passed, right? So there's things like that kind of just raise my conviction level a little bit more.
Did any of them remember slight details differently of the story? Like not the basic of like, oh, he was hit by a beam and that, so they passed on that, but were there little details that each one had that were like, oh, this guy was standing over here, so he saw that. This girl was standing over here, so she saw that?
I can't tell you, but I would assume so. I would assume there are some like varying details there, but I think the core detail is that they were all terrified of what they saw, and that is and again, even Travis would say, and he said this, in my interview with him, he's not saying they're from Zeta Reticuli. He's not saying they're ultra-terrestrial or interdimensional. He's even open to the idea that this is an American military project.
Meaning not alien at all.
Yeah, because he's like, there were like human-looking things involved. So he's like, maybe it's some secret, weird project. He's not excluding anything. He's not convinced that it's one thing. He has information. Here's the information.
Right.
It's up to us as researchers, to take that information, catalog it, and hold it up against the other findings, like those other cases we mentioned, which happened before and after, which are similar, right? I think those things, for me, raise my conviction a little bit more by a few points.
To go back to the first detail of the case, though, just so I understand this, because we talked a lot about the guy with the hair and kind of the bowl cut and the helmet, and he was tall and blue eyes and like human looking and strong. The first 4.5 foot beings that he saw when he woke up on the table, how did he describe their heads again?
They were like large heads, big eyes, but they weren't black. And so again, this is he has no idea why, but he thinks maybe because they have, and this is a good theory, he says maybe because they have big eyes, that they're extremely light sensitive, right? If you have bigger eyes, bigger pupils, that's more light coming in.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so maybe there's some type of bioengineered sunglass contact lenses that they throw over so that things aren't as bright. Like this might be extremely bright for them.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.